How do ideas move and connect across massive cultural divides without losing their core truth? Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're unpacking a really transformative framework for cross-cultural communication. We'll be diving straight into the profound insights from Paul Hiebert's classic work, Mission and Cultural Anthropology. Now, whether you're interested in global missions, sociology, or just navigating our increasingly diverse modern world, Hiebert's work is an absolute goldmine. He takes these complex anthropological concepts and applies them directly to the challenge of sharing a message across totally unfamiliar cultures. Because it's not just about what you say, it's about how it's received, understood, and ultimately lived out. Okay, let's dive right into this. To grow crops well, you must use water-soluble fertilizer. Sounds like farming advice, right? Well, it's actually a brilliant analogy for communication. Think about a farmer tending to a field. If you just throw dry, hard fertilizer onto the dirt, the roots of the crops can't absorb it. It just sits there on the surface. For the plant to actually take in those vital nutrients, the fertilizer absolutely has to be dissolved in water. The water acts as the vehicle. Hiebert argues that sharing a message, specifically the gospel, is exactly like this. The truth is the nutrient, but the local culture, that's the water. For the gospel to be truly absorbed and to bring life to a new group of people, it needs a cultural vehicle. It literally has to be soluble in the daily lives, the languages, and the customs of the people receiving it. Section 1. Gospel meets culture, translating truth. This is where things get really fascinating. Because historically, humans are pretty bad at untangling our own cultural habits from the core truth we're trying to share. Hiebert introduces a core concept here: the absolute necessity of separating the absolute truth of the gospel from the human cultures it enters. He points out something vital. The gospel is God's revelation. It's transcendent, and it doesn't inherently belong to Western culture, Eastern culture, or any single human society. But, to be understood, it must be incarnated in human cultural forms. Think of the old saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. We're not talking about compromising the truth here. It's about translating it. If a messenger refuses to adapt to the local culture, if they insist on keeping their message wrapped up in their own foreign cultural packaging, they're going to face massive miscommunication. The truth gets lost in translation, not because the message is flawed, but because the delivery method is entirely foreign. Now, what's really interesting is how Hiebert breaks down exactly what culture actually is. He doesn't just mean food, clothing, or music. He digs into the deep worldviews that make up a culture, breaking the whole shebang into 3 specific dimensions. First, the cognitive dimension. This is how a culture determines what's true and what's false. Second, the affective dimension. This dictates what people feel is beautiful, ugly, comforting, or totally offensive. And third, the evaluative dimension, which is the moral compass of a society defining what is fundamentally good or bad. Hiebert gives a pretty stark warning here. If someone tries to communicate across cultures without understanding these 3 deep dimensions, they're going to experience serious communication breakdowns. You might be speaking the exact same language, but you are operating in completely different worlds. Section 2. Incarnational attitude, a learner's posture. So, knowing how incredibly deep and complex these cultural dimensions are, how on earth is someone supposed to navigate them? Well, it requires a very specific mindset. Hiebert uses the term incarnational missionary. What does that mean? He stresses that having intense passion or vast theological knowledge is simply not enough on its own. You can have all the right answers, but if you don't have the right posture, no one is going to listen to you. An incarnational messenger is someone who deliberately adopts a learner's attitude. Instead of coming in as the expert from the outside to fix everything, they come in to learn, to listen, and to truly identify with the local people. The goal is to build genuine foundational trust. The model here is Jesus himself, right? He didn't just shout instructions from heaven. He took on human form to actually dwell among people. And this brilliantly illustrates the dynamic that happens when this learner's attitude is applied. The source text uses this fascinating scientific metaphor, a surfactant. Now, you know that water and oil naturally repel each other. They'll separate no matter how hard you shake them. 2 vastly different cultures can act the exact same way. But a surfactant, like soap, is a chemical agent that binds to both water and oil, allowing them to finally mix. A successful incarnational missionary acts precisely as this surfactant. By humbling themselves and deeply understanding both their own message and the local culture, they become the bridge that seamlessly connects 2 completely different worlds without destroying the properties of either one. Section 3. Contextualization, navigating traditions. Let's get practical. Let's say you've built the trust and you are acting as that bridge. Eventually, you're going to run into established local traditions, rituals, and customs. What do you do with them? Do you throw them all out? Do you accept them all? Let's slow down here. When facing established customs, we usually fall into two common traps. On one side, we have ethnocentrism. This is the arrogant approach. It's viewing your own culture as superior and demanding that the locals reject all their old customs and adopt yours. It absolutely destroys the local identity. But on the other side, we have the opposite extreme, cultural relativism. This is the uncritical acceptance of absolutely all local cultural practices, saying, hey, whatever you do is fine, even if those practices are harmful or contradict the core truth you're trying to share. Both of these extremes are incredibly dangerous. One destroys the culture, the other dilutes the truth. It is a really delicate balancing act. So the crucial point is finding the golden mean between those two extremes. Hiebert calls this critical contextualization. And pay close attention to who is actually doing the work here. It is not the outsider dictating the rules. Instead, the local believers themselves evaluate their own customs. They hold their traditions up against biblical standards and critically assess what is good, what needs to be changed, and what needs to be left behind entirely. By doing this themselves, they create new, genuinely Christian ways that still feel authentically like their own culture. This ensures the contextualization is healthy, sustainable, and deeply rooted, rather than being forced from the outside. Section 4. Self-theologizing, beyond independence. The goal of cross-cultural communication isn't just to make a group of people dependent on an outsider forever. The goal is maturity and autonomy. Hiebert argues powerfully for a concept called self-theologizing. True autonomy means that local churches don't just act as recording devices, memorizing and parroting imported foreign theology. That's just another form of dependence, right? Instead, they have both the right and the profound responsibility to read the text themselves, interpret it, and develop a living theology that is perfectly suited to their unique cultural context, all under the guidance of the Holy Spirit. This is when a movement truly comes alive. It stops being a foreign import and becomes a deeply rooted, self-sustaining, and vibrant local expression of truth. Section 5. Applying insights in our daily lives. Now, we've covered some incredibly high-level, abstract, theological, and anthropological concepts today. But the absolute brilliance of Hiebert's work is that it doesn't just apply to someone packing their bags to move across the globe. We need to bring this back to our everyday interactions. We live in an incredibly modern, multicultural, and diverse world. You interact with different cultures every single day, whether that's across generational divides, different political backgrounds, or just different workplace environments. So I want to leave you with this. How are you translating your absolute truths into the cultural languages of those around you? Are you acting like that surfactant, building trust with a learner's attitude? Or are you just throwing dry fertilizer on hard ground and wondering why nothing is growing?